I challenged my viewers. What is the maximum amount of RuneScape bosses that you can defeat in a single hour? The winner gets over 2 billion GP. Everyone can enter these challenges. The rules for this challenge were simple. You can only defeat each boss once, you are not allowed to bank, and you are not allowed to use boss portals. The contestants had 1 hour and the timer started when they activated an aura. Other than that, the contestants were allowed to do any type of preparation that they wanted and take any items along with them for the ride. This resulted in people having to defeat the bosses quickly and having to find a great path between all the bosses. Let me know in the comments what you think about this challenge and make sure to stick around to the end of this video as I will reveal another challenge. We got a bunch of submissions for this challenge and there will be a high score at the end of the video, but because there are hours and hours of footage to go through, we will be focusing on 2 of the most competitive runs. Let's jump right into the challenge. The first run we are looking at is submitted by Cyrus, and as you can see, he is starting off at Masuda. The contestants would time their run of this challenge using auras. So one of the strategies that all the best runs used, you'll see right away here. He damages the boss right up until it's about to die, and right before it does, he starts his aura, starting the challenge. He then continues through the dungeon and takes on the next boss, which he defeats in a single cycle. He then runs back to the elite dungeon chest and uses its teleport option to teleport to the 4th elite dungeon, bringing him to Zamorak. He makes quick work of this godly boss, and upon defeating him, he chooses to leave the loot behind and instead teleport right on to the next boss. He teleports to Sofnam to go to the Magister, using a teleport tablet that was placed in his inventory. And this is a great time to point out what kind of a crazy inventory people chose to bring to their challenge runs. A ton of people chose to completely forego food and other supplies and instead fill their inventories to the brim with all kinds of teleports that would let them get to more bosses quicker. Upon taking out the Magister, he teleports to the God Wars dungeon. Here we can see some crazy optimizations that he does throughout this run. He builds up tons of stacks using Threads of Fates on the minion that he then can use on the boss to take them out quicker. For this challenge, hard mode and normal mode versions of the same boss did count as separate entries in the challenge. Therefore, upon defeating this boss in normal mode, he decides to spin up a hard mode instance and take that boss out as well. He then repeats this process for the Armadillo, Bandos and Zamorak bosses in God Wars Dungeon 1. Notably, he uses teleports to get back to the middle every single time instead of running back all the way, saving just a bit of time. Next up, he makes his way to the Dagonoth Kings, and as you might have noticed, he's using Necromancy, so he won't be able to attack any of the Dagonoth Kings. Luckily, that's why he's bringing one decimation weapon which does not require ammo, which allows him to take out one of the Dagonoth Kings and secure himself the kill. Next up is the Queen Black Dragon, and upon taking this one out, he actually sticks around for the loot for the first time. He ends up getting the exact loot he wanted, Saradomin Brews, as he made sure to only bring as many teleport tablets as he needed. At this point, he can replace those inventory slots with a few of the Saradomin brews that he got as a drop from this boss as a safety policy for future harder bosses. He then heads to Port Sarim and takes a ship all the way to Port Phasmatis, which leads him right into Araxor. He jumps right onto path 1 and completely skips an entire phase by doing a ton of damage and takes out the boss shortly after that. Once again, he loots the corpse and is able to pick up a rocktail drop, which he will once again take as some panic food later down the line. With the safety of this food in his inventory, he decides to once again return to the God Wars dungeon, but this time to take on Nex. As you'll see later, the top competitors were super close with their runs, so if they die, they completely lose the run, as the time they would lose would pretty much mean they would have to reset the entire run. Luckily for him, the next kill ends up being pretty smooth, and he once again sticks around for the drop in hopes to get another brew for his inventory. However, this time he has no such luck. He then makes his way to the city of using the lodestone and takes on both Hermod and Raziel in quick succession, and only uses a single dose of his Saradomin brews. Next up, he buys the runes he needs for a teleport to Anachronia and makes his way to the Rex Matriarchs. Here, once again, just like with the Dagonoth Kings, he uses the bow that he brought along to take out one of the Rex Matriarchs. Next up, he teleports to the God Wars Dungeon 2 using teleport tablets once again. He also of course made sure to have the KC required to start these boss fights ahead of starting the challenge. He jumps right into a Grigorovic kill and takes him out in normal mode, but he decides to not take on the hard mode version of this boss. He then makes his way to Vindicta and takes out both the normal and hard mode versions of the boss. Followed up by Hellweir. Here he actually makes a bit of a mistake and ends up signing to a huge hit in hard mode. At this point, the safety net of the sign is gone. Any mistake could completely ruin the run. Nevertheless, he moves on to both versions of the Twin Furies and then makes his way to the center of God Wars Dungeon 2 at a kill count of 26 bosses. Before we continue looking at this run, let's have a look at another one of our contestants, Pup. Pup decided to start off in a completely different area, being God Wars Dungeon 3 or the Elder God Wars Dungeon. He's starting off with Carapac and taking out hard mode first to save the most time possible. Once again, he starts his aura at the end of the kill, and upon taking him out, he moves on straight to the normal version of the same boss. Pup's inventory is also quite different compared to Cyrus. We can see that he decided to bring a yak and therefore is able to bring a bunch of Saradomin brews, which will allow him to heal throughout this run. Not only that, he'll also have way more options to bring all kinds of teleports and other useful items. He even brings an entire melee switch, as well as a bunch of power burst potions that will allow him to move way quicker throughout the overworld. He then makes his way to Araxor using a fairy ring and starts the boss fight. Araxor was actually quite a popular starting point for a lot of other contestants, as it allowed them to skip the time that you have to wait for the web to burn down. We can see that Pup is not waiting around for boss drops. He teleports out right away. Because he has the yak and the food, he doesn't really have to rely on boss drops to get the food that he needs. Of course, he is also completely missing out on familiar damage by taking a yak, so we'll have to see later if the extra teleports were worth the damage that he's losing. He takes out the Chaos Elemental, and then he teleports to his house, which he has smartly placed in Menethos. He then uses the boat here to transport him all the way to the Calphite Hive. I didn't even know this transportation method existed. While he's in the Calphite Hive, he makes quick work of both the Calphite King and the Calphite Queen, after which he used the Slayer perk cape, which he has placed in his Zug cape, to teleport to Laniakea and start the Raksha boss fight. After Raksha, he uses the Drakan's Medallion and decides to take on Rise of the Six completely solo. It takes him a minute, but he takes out all the 6 brothers and uses the Lodestone to teleport to the Legions. Interestingly, he just completely takes out the Legion with Necromancy. After which, he uses a Shadow Reef token to teleport to the Shadow Reef and uses the chest to make his way to the first elite dungeon. As he enters, we can see that he already prepared the dungeon before starting this run, allowing him to completely skip most of the dungeon and skip to the last 2 bosses, saving a ton of time and making these bosses worth taking out. This is the same point that Cyrus decided to start at, and so clearly they both came to the same conclusion, which is that the first part of this elite dungeon is not worth doing. But the bosses at the end are quite quick. After taking out both Masuda and Seryu, he decides to teleport to Zuk. And once again, just like ED1, he already pre-prepared Zuk by getting all the way up to wave 16 in normal mode, which allowed him to get a checkpoint there. By doing so, he can start right at the Jed wave, followed by the Harakan wave, and finally the Zuk wave, allowing him to get 3 more boss KC by only doing 3 waves. Next up, he makes his way to God Wars Dungeon 2, where he decides to start with Telos. He ends up finishing off Telos, bringing him up to 15 kills. Let's jump back over to Cyrus, as he has also just taken out Telos and is now making his way to the Elder God Wars Dungeon. He makes his way from the cathedral all the way to Carapac. And as this is quite a walk, we can see why Pup decided to start at this boss to completely cut out this journey. He decides to only take out normal mode Carapac here, as doing a full hard mode kill just takes too long, which once again clues us in why Pup decided to start at this boss. After Carapac, Cyrus decides to jump straight to Zuk, where he also had set up the boss at wave 16, allowing him to get straight to the 3 bosses. He then finishes his journey in the Elder God Wars dungeon by taking out both normal mode and hard mode of the arch-glacor. He teleports to the wilderness and gets to the Chaos Elemental, but gets very unlucky when there's already someone killing the boss in his world. As the rules state, you have to be the only person to deal damage to the boss. He has to hop worlds, losing a bit of time. He once again sticks around for the drop and gets lucky once again with some stews. He then uses lodestones to quickly get to the legions, both normal and hard mode versions of the giant mole and the king black dragon. He then once again teleports to the wilderness and makes his way to the second elite dungeon. Here he once again uses the chest to teleport to the first elite dungeon again? That's right, this is where he started off the challenge, but you can actually also get to the first boss pretty quickly. It's mainly the path between the first and the second boss that takes too long for people to feel like it's worth doing this entire dungeon in this challenge. And even more interestingly, Cyrus had actually grinded Elite Dungeon 1 before doing this run to get a fishy treat as a drop in the Elite Dungeon 1 chest. With his one free inventory space, he takes it out of the chest and makes his way to the Sanctum Guardian. The fishy treat is a rare drop from this boss and allows you to insta-kill it. It still gives you KC and the loot and therefore is completely allowed in this challenge. He then uses the Slayer Cape in his inventory to teleport to Raksha and take the boss out. He then uses the Bandit Camp Lodestone to make his way to the Calphite Hive, and here he of course takes out both the Calphite King and the Queen. He then makes his way to Barrows, which he had already pre-cleared. He makes his way to the chest and claims the loot, which does give KC within the hour, even though he had pre-prepared it before the hour, which once again is a clever strategy and falls within the rules. He then makes his way once again to the wilderness for one last time, jumps in the Corporeal Beast Cave, he takes on the Corporeal Beast with barely any time left on his aura and literally takes out the boss 1 second before his aura depletes, bringing his total boss kill count to 44 bosses in a single hour. So let's jump back over to Pup and see if he is able to match that. As we return to Pup, he is on his way to the Dagonoth Kings. He uses the full melee setup that he brought to take out one of the Dagonoth Kings, after which he teleports to the city of to take out both Raziel and Hermod. He teleports to Edgeville, takes out the King Black Dragon, and makes his way to the Sophanam dungeon to take out the Magister. At this point, he goes on an absolute rampage and takes out both the normal mode and hard mode versions of the arch-glacor, Ziliana, Krill, Grardor, and Kriara. And finally, he takes out Nex to completely clear the God Wars dungeon. Next up on the chopping block is the Queen Black Dragon, and he does not stick around for the loot. Instead, he teleports to Anachronia and makes his way to the Rex Matriarchs. He once again makes use of his full melee switch to take out this boss even quicker than most people. After this, he teleports to Falador and starts his final killing spree, where he takes out both normal mode and hard mode of the Giant Mole, after which he teleports to God Wars Dungeon 2 again to take out both normal mode and hard modes of Helweir, Gregorovich, the Twin Furies, and Vindicta, adding another 8 KC to his total. Upon taking out Vindicta, he is ready to teleport to the Corporeal Beast. However, he accidentally makes a mistake and teleports to Berg the Wrath instead. Usually that wouldn't be a big deal, but he only had one charge on the necklace he used, and therefore now has to use the way slower home teleport in the wilderness. This could really cost a boss kill or two. With little time remaining, he makes his way there anyway, and while he makes his way there, I should point out that a lot of contestants ended with both Barrows and Corporeal Beast, as these two bosses cannot be done with familiars. Corporeal Beast eats your familiar and you just can't enter Barrows with one. Therefore, these bosses were the last for most people's runs. Pup is able to take out the Corporeal Beast and tying things up with Cyrus. He then teleports to the Barrows, which he had also pre-prepared before this run, making his way to the Barrows chest and claiming his KC. He tries to squeeze in one more kill at ED3, but ran out of time, partially because of his mistaken teleport to the Corporeal Beast. But in any case, Pup ends his challenge run with 45 KC and winning the challenge, as well as the 2,249 million GP main prize. This prize was made possible by a ton of donations from the community, as you can see on screen right now. And here you can see the entire leaderboard for this challenge. 5 other contestants also won a participation prize prize of 112 million GP. Now, it is time for the next challenge. The winner of the challenge will be whoever can get the most total levels in a single hour on an Iron Man account. Your end score for the challenge will be the amount of total levels you gained in the hour. We are once again starting off the GP prize at 1 billion GP. If you want to contribute to the prize pool of the next challenge and have your name be featured in the next video, then join the Discord down below. The Discord is also where you should go to submit your challenges or if you want any more information on them. There is an entire area dedicated for discussion and frequently asked questions.